Greetings, Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me. What I wanted to share with you today comes from Samuel. Now, Samuel, when this whole bushcrafting craze came out a number of years ago now, he was approximately 12 and started honing his craft, his bushcraft, in his backyard and whatnot on his property. They used to live just outside of Fairbanks when he would practice all this stuff. And so moving on into adulthood, he decided, you know what, I'm gonna up my game. I'm gonna go out into the wild and do some bushcraft and really see if I can make a go of it, and so his plan was to basically, and I kind of laugh because just the thought of bushcrafting for homesteading or something like that is just it's more of a survival thing. But he initially had this idea, so he was going to take the skills he had honed over the years as far as bushcrafting, and he was going to attempt, before the homesteading thought, hunting. And so what he wanted to do is get out to where he's going to caribou hunt, find a nice little quiet spot, and use materials around there to make him a nice little bushcraft shelter to hang out in versus a tent. Fair enough. Fair enough. Less gear to pack around and whatnot, and gives you a chance to do what you like, right? So, for caribou hunting, it's a month-long period, right? And so what he did is, the week before hunting opened, he went out south of the Denali, south of the North Fork of the Golcana River, right into the alphabets. He went to a spot he considered a honey hole for moose, and wouldn't have to go far for caribou. He four-wheelered in. He brought all his essentials he'd need for his little bushcraft shelter. So he spent, and he was there. Built this shelter, bushcraft style. He was using willow alders and other stuff, 1.5 2 inches thick, and the brush out there, it's a tangled mess. You know what I mean? Once you get into those willows and stuff, they go all over the place. He was collecting it from a certain area that was real dense, so he was picking the ones with the least amount of bow in them and all that kind of stuff. So he was real selective in what he did, and so he built an A-frame style little shelter. And it was, about 5 foot tall, so he'd squat down in there or whatever. He had his little mini stove he made out of an old oil can, made it into a little wood stove just for hot tent purposes, stay warm or whatever, because he was dealing with a lot of rain. This happened approximately 10 years ago or so. Now, when he got this structure done, he got it done in just a couple of days. And what he would do is, he was getting a little annoyed because of heavy fog would roll in every morning, just as it was looking like, oh yeah, it's going to be a good morning. Next thing you knew, turn around, heavy fog was rolled in. So on day 8 of this whole thing, now he had been going all over the place on his wheeler. He had been spotting, he's been trying to find where the moose are hiding out, so come opening day, he could be where he needs to be to get his moose and hopefully some caribou as well. Now, what Sam didn't anticipate is the density of the fog. It was very, very foggy. It wasn't actually a whole decade back. We're going roundabouts. Nothing I can get into, but being general with it, okay? So what ended up happening is he's got this structure done, this little A-frame. He stayed warm in it, had no issues. He saw a couple bears during this time, and opening day, he was at this spot. He was looking for this particular moose he had seen a couple days prior, and he was really focused on that. Because where it was at, he didn't have to use his four-wheeler. to get there and make all this extra noise and potentially run the game off, right? He said once he got up onto this little knoll, this little rise, he was spotting for this moose that he knew was in the area, but he wasn't having any luck. It was dead quiet. His visibility was good, but as the morning progressed and got lighter, the fog got real dense to where he had 25 feet visibility. I mean, it was real dense. It was like the clouds came down to the ground. It was dense. So he was like, crap. So he makes his way back to his shelter. He was not paying attention to his four-wheeler or anything. He knew it was right over there. And what he would do is he took extra brush and kind of lean it up on his four-wheeler so in case anyone coming by wouldn't steal his gas or try to take his winch. Just people do dumb shit. But so he's not paying attention to it as he gets back. He goes inside and he makes himself something to eat because he had left early and didn't eat anything. So he was inside his little bushcraft spot making something to eat. And he kept hearing a weird noise and he thought maybe that's just the wind blowing the willows. It kept sounding like leaves rustling and stuff, right? But it was weird because it wasn't like a rustle and then quiet, nothing suspect. It seemed like a constant. So he assumed the wind was coming in a little higher and blowing the treetops, the tops of the brush. So he's listening for a minute and he starts eating his ramen noodles. And as he's eating the ramen noodles, he's feeling this weird thumping in the ground. It's not audible. He feels it. It's just a thump, right? He's like, that is a weird feeling because he's not hearing it, he's feeling it. Everything's got this little jiggle to it every couple second, like every second or so, jiggle. And he, for the life of him, he couldn't figure it out. Because he was sitting still. He had pretty hardy bushcraft, with how he built his structure. So he was really thrown off by that. And so he finishes his ramen and decides, you know what, I'm gonna take a look around. Maybe that bear I saw is back, and that's what I was feeling. So he goes about finishing up, and then grabs his gun right there, right next to his makeshift doorway, and he steps outside. Now he's hunting with a 270, which little light for moose, but I've killed plenty of moose with it. But so that's what he had. He had a 270, and he also had a 357 Magnum, little snub nose he kept in his pocket of his windbreak, just in case something's chewing on him. He could stick something in its ear and pop it, So he goes out, and the fog is super dense. Visibility is not much. He can make out the dark shadows of the brush around, and from memory he knew, oh, that's the brush right over there by where I stashed my four-wheeler. This is the brush directly behind, and so on. But it was real dense fog. So he's trying to feel the ground because, again, he's not hearing anything. He's feeling it. It's just weird. He said the cadence would change, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but it was something shaking the ground, and he just couldn't pinpoint it. And so he goes over towards his four-wheeler and noticed all the brush he had laid on there. He couldn't see it. It was gone, and it wasn't immediately in view. And again, dense fog. So he goes over and he's looking, and he notices this mud smears on his four-wheeler. And it looked weird at first. It almost looked like someone took a muddy set of leaves and was kind of dragging it around. And then as he got closer and started paying attention, it looked like huge finger smears of mud, right? He was like, what the hell is that? Because it was huge. What he perceived as a handprint was huge, and he wasn't computing that, there's no one with a hand that size in his mind at that time, because his mind was bushcraft. It wasn't hairy man. It wasn't Sasquatch. He didn't even have that on his radar, right? So he's inspecting his four-wheeler, and he's looking at all these smudges, and he's like, oh man, geez. He pops one of his little storage bins open and grabs a wet rag that he usually wipe off the headlights with or whatever, but he starts wiping off the mud and stuff, and he said it was mud, but there was a greasy component to it that it smeared and just wouldn't easily wipe off, and it had a weird kind of pungent smell to it that he couldn't really place. And he just thought it was odd. No alarm bells going off. No, it was just weird, high strangeness. So he said, he inspected around. He couldn't find any of the brush that he had laid up against the four-wheeler to conceal it in his absence, from anyone messing with it. So he's like, well, crap, the fog is pretty dense. So I'm just going to do it now. So he goes and grabs his little handsaw and goes to the brush pile where he had been cutting branches and doing his little bushcraft from. Now, as he's doing so, the thumping in the ground starts up again, right? Because for a little while there, it just dissipated, and he forgot about it once he saw the weirdness with the four-wheeler, right? So he's using his handsaw and just kind of mumbling to himself about, geez, there was no wind. I wonder if the wind blew while I was gone or something. He's trying to, like, work it out in his mind why all this stuff is missing. Why is there a smear? And again, no red flags, no alarm bells going off. He's just going through the motions of recovering his four-wheeler, He was hoping that the fog would clear before darkness fell and he can get back on that moose, right? Again, where he was hunting for the moose was maybe 500 yards away, as the crow flies. So, it took him about 45 minutes to hike over to the spot, right? So he's thinking about that as he's cutting all this stuff, he said. And his mind, again, was not, and he kicks himself for not paying better attention because his mind was focused on his bushcrafting, cutting and covering his four-wheeler than it was his own safety. Because that thumping in the ground, that little jolt every second or so. And he said it felt like it was getting closer, and at one point he turned around and he's like, what the hell? What's going on here? He didn't see anything but dense fog, right? Now, approximately 30 feet away is all this brush, because he's just off of a trail. He's not that far off of a pretty well-used trail. He's about maybe 20 feet at the most off of the trail. And directly on the opposite side of the trail, within 10 feet, is this line of willow brush. It's approximately 5 foot tall and dense, just packed dense. You know what I mean? And so he's looking around, and dense fog as hell. He couldn't make anything out. He could just see the darkness of the brush, and it's all obscured by fog, right? No outstanding shapes or anything, just the brush. And he's looking around, and okay, nothing. Goes back to what he's doing, and he's dragging the brush back over to cover up his four-wheeler. As he's getting up to it, he sets the brush down. Now, he had left his .270 rifle leaning on that four-wheeler because he needed both hands to drag the brush, and he had the .357 in his pocket, right? So when he gets over there, his .270 rifle isn't where he left it. He notices the sling looked like it had been, and this is a nylon sling, it looked like it had been snapped in two, and he didn't even notice that until, because the rifle initially he couldn't see it at all. It was not where he had left it, leaned right up against by the front tire of this four-wheeler. And he's looking around, and he notices that one of the pieces of strap hanging over a little piece of brush about 3 feet away, just right there. And he was, what the hell? Yeah. And so he goes immediately to retrieve his rifle, and he grabs the strap and he's pulling on it, and there's the butt stock, and then he slides the rifle out. Well, the rifle had been bent. He said it was just past the bolt where the bolt meets the barrel. It was bent right there. It's just ever so slightly of a bend, but it was no good. It was toast. And he's dumbfounded. He's got this torn strap, the weird marks, his rifle's friggin' bent. So he's like, something is going on. So he starts hollering out, hey, who's out there? He's upset. He had this Savage .270 for a very long time. It was his first rifle. It shot straight and true. And, he was upset someone basically destroyed his gun. And he didn't hear it. He was, maybe 45, 50 feet away from this spot. And he didn't hear any commotion, any snapping of that nylon. None of it. So he is totally dumbfounded. Immediately, he's got his revolver in his hand, little snub-nose .357. and he's looking around, and he's really straining to look, because it's dense fog. It's light out, but dense fog. I mean, clouds on the ground, dense fog, okay? So he's looking around, and he starts feeling this motion again. Thump, thump. Then he hears rustling in the brush off to his left. He couldn't tell distance, but it was rustling off to his left. He turns and focuses that direction, and he sees a dark shape. He said it was silhouetted like a man, but much larger. He could barely make it out through the fog, just barely. And he instantly spooked and started yelling, hey, get out of here. What are you doing? This is, I'm a hunter over here. I'm armed. Or what are you doing? You're going to get yourself shot playing these games, right? Not a sound. He's freaked out because it's obvious he knows the brush is 5 foot. This thing is well over that. He couldn't tell exactly how much well over it, but enough to know that, holy crap, that thing is huge. He doesn't know what to do. He's got a bent rifle. This weirdness is going on. And so what he decides to do is he fires up his four-wheeler. And once it warms up, because he's keeping an eye, he wheelers on over and parks the four-wheeler directly right next to his little A-frame that he built bushcraft style. He wanted it real nearby. He didn't know what the hell was going on. So he goes inside of his little A-frame after he parks the four-wheeler, and he's basically looking at the rifle and trying, what the hell? Well, he notices on the grip handle and on the barrel, there's these weird kind of greasy substance like what was on his seat. And he's, what the hell is this, right? And the bolt won't even action because it was bent just enough that it locked that bolt into place. He tried banging it to, get the round out of there. He didn't want it accidentally going off, but he wanted to keep it to go, what the hell happened, just kind of like a showpiece of the high strangeness, because I don't know of any man strong enough to bend a rifle like that. It's crazy. So he's got his door of his little bushcraft place open, which is basically the whole front. He had to lift and just kind of shimmy it out because, again, it was bushcraft. It wasn't hanging on hinges or nothing, And so he had it propped open to let the light in so he can investigate stuff but feel protected. Everything was doubled up, because they're only 2 inches diameter. He had a layer of the willows. Then he put, moss and stuff, and then another layer of the willows on top, so he had kind of a sandwich effect for a little more warmth and all that. So he doesn't know what to do. He's kind of sitting there going, I maybe I should leave, maybe I shouldn't. There was nothing too ominous. I mean, yeah, a bent rifle is definitely a red flag, but there was no active aggression towards him, so that fight or flight hadn't kicked in. So without that fight or flight kicking in, he was definitely starting to bug out because he's basically sitting there inside his little structure, just looking at everything in front of him. The bent rifle, what just happened out in the brush, moments before, and he's just kind of basically in shock is what it boils down to. And so, excuse me, as he's sitting there contemplating these things, he has his 357 sitting right on his lap. He had to keep catching because he was knocking it off his lap when he was fiddling with the rifle. But he basically is like, okay, something's going on above and beyond what I can deal with. I'm just gonna go. So he had been there. He invested days building this thing, was out searching for his moose and all that stuff. And it dawned on him, well, wait, I have 2 friends that are supposed to be showing up later today. I'll wait for them. And he was torn with that decision because every bit of him wanted to get the hell out of there, but yet he wanted someone else with him for that sense of, security, security in numbers. Well, so he sits there in his little A-frame, and, he's contemplating everything going on. As the day goes on, he's hearing noises. He's staying in there, but he's hearing noises off to his left further down the trail, which would be due south. And he's hearing these noises in the brush. He's hearing weird squirrel chatter, which was way too loud to be actually a squirrel. Just numerous other things, but nothing in view because, again, he's looking out this A-frame. He's not actively standing up and looking down the way. He's basically holed up, in shock, and basically scared. I mean, that's what it boils down to. He was filled with indecision. He was concerned with the dense fog taking off on the wheeler and being potentially ambushed by this thing, and just a whole litany of other things, you know. And so as he's sitting there, he's hearing other people off in the distance. He can clearly hear four-wheeler movements way down the trail going back towards the North Fork of the Golcana and stuff. And so he's like, well, okay, I know other hunters are out and about. You know, there's bound to be someone coming by this trail. There's bound to be, and I'll, you know, when I hear them getting close, I'll step out and, you know, just kind of run everything past them. So he's sitting there, and sure enough, a little while later, he hears the sound of what he made out to be two-wheelers coming and assumed it was some other hunters. And so he gets out, and coming through the fog was actually his two buddies that were coming to meet up with them, and he felt the world of relief, right? So his friends come pulling up, he's waving them down and stuff, and they're, you know, small talking, and they're like, well, what happened? You look spooked, because I guess he looked real pale, according to what his friend said. Now, he goes through everything. He shows there's still marks on the seat. He shows them the rifle, and they're all talking, and they're kind of looking at him like, what's really going on here, dude? You know, yeah, are you messing with us? Because they didn't know what to do with all this information. They were just kind of shocked. They were not mocking him. They were just, are you sure you saw that? You know, they were, because they knew Sam long enough to know that he wasn't bullshitting them. And so they all just kind of sat there, and one of his friends, you know, he mentioned, well, Bigfoot. And the other buddy that was with them kind of chuckled and said, oh, geez, you know, why is Bigfoot going to bend your rifle? Yeah, and which is a dumb thing to say, but, you know, he didn't know any better, and he was just like, why would that be? So they're all discussing this momentarily. Now, they had just gotten there. This is within 10 minutes of them getting there, and him spilling the beans on everything going on and whatnot, walking them through everything. Off behind him, where he had, you know, if you were in that little A-frame facing the trail, off to the left, which would be due south, they hear this squirrel chatter he had just been talking about. Real loud, real crisp, and obviously way too big to be a squirrel. So they immediately realize, oh, this is no bullshit, and immediately they're unscabbering their rifles. They one of them had a pistol in his rear saddlebag type deal for his four-wheeler. He dug that out, slung it over. It was a hip holster, but he slung it over his shoulder, and it was kind of hanging like a, you know, armpit holster or whatever. So as they're talking, they're all listening to this noise, and it sounds like it's coming towards them in the brush. So they are slowly backing away from the A-frame out onto the trail proper, looking back into the brush, and they're not seeing anything. Dense fog. Yeah, I mean, very, very dense fog. Literally cloud on the ground kind of stuff, socked in, you know. Visibility was kind of hit and miss, because you could see the density kind of flow through, and then it'd lighten up, and then it'd get denser. Just, I mean, creepy environment. So they hear this movement. They're looking into the brush, and one of his friends says, I see movement right over there, right over there. Well, everyone's looking straight back behind this A-frame, but the movement is about 40 yards further down. And as they all turn to look to where he's pointing, they see this dark figure kind of lean out and then go right back into the brush. Immediately, everyone's, pack up, grab your stuff, let's go. So, of course, you know, hey, he's got his friends there and stuff. He feels comfortable turning his back on what's going on, so he goes and gathers up what he needs to gather up, and he's getting stuff strapped to his back, you know, on the backside of his four-wheeler and stuff. And his friends are like, you know, talking to each other. Do you see it? No, I don't. Oh, there's movement, right? So that when his friends started saying there's movement, it caught his attention, and he kind of leans back out of this little A-frame structure and is looking that direction, and this thing walks from the brush across the trail into the brush again, almost silently, and disappears into the fog off to their right. immediately both his friends are lighting up. That was a Bigfoot. That was a Bigfoot. You know, they were real, I mean, animated. Sam's like, quiet down, quiet down. You know, let's listen, let's listen. And they're all listening and they can hear it moving in the brush, but with the fog, they can't see nothing. And it sounds like it's doing this half circle around them, right? So they're, you know, they're like, get it going, get it going. Come on, hurry up, get it done. Sam's trying. He's, you know, kind of fumbling over stuff. His nerves are real high. Well, battery change. So Sam is getting his stuff together. He's just about done, and he was messing with this old oil can. It was one of those square types, real old style. He had found it somewhere in a yard sale and converted it into this little wood stove, and he was, you know, proud of its construction or whatever, but the way he had it through everything, he just said screw it. You know, there was no active fire in it. It was cold. He just said screw it. And he didn't want to leave the structure the way it was. He, you know, anytime he had done bushcraft in the past, he had just broken things up, you know, because he never used anything that wasn't made from nature outside of the stove he's leaving in there, which under the circumstances is, you know, far less of an issue than what those frickers. Anyway, that shantytown shit. Anyway, let me not stray off course here. So he starts breaking it down. He's kicking out the bottoms of this A-frame to flatten it out, right? He's doing all that, and his friends are like, hey, screw that. Don't worry about that. They're telling him, hey, don't worry about that. That'll collapse over time. Don't sweat that. You need to, you know, get in gear. We got to go. Again, this thing was doing this half circle around them, and it's the direction they are needing to go at this point. Sam gathers up his stuff. He's good on his four-wheeler and stuff. He's got his 357 basically still in his pocket, and you know, he said, I'm not armed with a rifle. I'll ride between you two. And his one buddy was like, I'll take the lead. You know, he was left-handed, so working the throttle and holding his rifle, pointing in the direction of that they heard the noise. He was best suited to be first, basically, because he was left-handed and had a left-handed rifle. So his friend takes off, Sam follows, and he's got his buddy behind him. And they're going real slow because visibility is shit, and they don't want to power right into this thing, and you know, they don't even know, you know. So they're going along, and they get about maybe 40 yards down the trail or so, and all of a sudden his friend lets off a shot. They're all startled because it just all of a sudden, you know, his friend's shooting. Bam! You know, he lets off of the handlebars, and they see him working the bolt action on his rifle and getting a better aim. And they're not seeing what he's seeing. He's about maybe 20 feet in front of them, you know, because they didn't want to stack pile on each other too tightly or whatever. So they're all kind of doing this number, you know. One would speed up, one would have to slow down, that kind of thing, you know, because nerves are on just wreck mode, you know. So his friend shoots, racks in another round, and is standing up, and his wheeler's still moving because he hasn't fully braked yet, and he's kind of rolling forward, aiming this rifle off into the brush, and then they hear movement, and they're like, go, 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 you know, because they could hear it off to their left-hand side. It was no longer quasi in front of them, and his friend was like, it's huge, you know, sets the rifle down in the rack because this thing has moved off to his left, and his friend dropped his rifle right in the rack and guns it, right? Just totally guns it. Boom, he was gone. All of a sudden, Sam and the other guy are standing there holding the bag like, oh, well, let's go. They get on it. Now, as they are powering up and getting up to speed, which is, you know, they're on four-wheelers. It's happening right now. They hear movement following them in the brush. Hard, heavy. Sam said it was very, very hard to... Forgive me, my phone was acting up. Sam said it was very, very hard to focus on driving because he kept wanting to look back over his left shoulder because of the level of this thrashing. And again, their friend that was in the lead that popped a shot and then racked another round and set it in his rifle holder was gone. I mean, boom, he powered out of there. So they're playing catch up, meanwhile trying to hear this thing moving alongside them. Well, they came to a point on the trail where it started going downhill out of the alphabets. And then it gets into this rolling, sloping, kind of mossy, grassy kind of area that's a little more open, and the brush ain't so tight to the trail. They get to that point, and there's still some brush on the left-hand side, but it's down to real low, real low. And the fog is broken up a little more at this area, and they could see their friend ahead of them who has stopped and is just standing there with his rifle kind of looking around in the brush and stuff, right? They get up there, and, you know, they have to stop because he's standing there. He goes, you know, what's going on? What's going on? Did it follow us? And they tell him, hey, we heard it, no worries. Well, as they're discussing what the hell, they hear movement coming from behind them, but it's at a distance, but it's that same brush sound. And so they fired back up and got on out of there. Sam said one of the things that really bothered him is the 2020 hindsight of all those days he was sitting there building this structure. There was weird noises happening that he just dismissed as alone paranoia. You're getting yourself worked up, all that kind of stuff. So it was really hard for him to reconcile everything because he felt so foolish of all the stuff he ignored while he was by himself and the potential danger he was in while doing that. I don't know if this thing had been shot at before and took the opportunity to bend the rifle. I don't know. He no longer has that rifle. Where he happened to still be staying with his dad at the time. And when he got back from that trip, he told his dad, hey, this rifle's bent. I'm going to attend to it. Didn't say anything to his dad at that point. But for whatever reason, he was doing something at work at one day or whatever, and the rifle ended up missing. So, you know, there went his keepsake from the trip. What else was there? That was basically it. He just basically beats himself up for the 2020 hindsight on all the weirdness he heard prior to things coming to a head. Because he had been there, 10 days, you know, roughly, give or take. He was there many days building this structure. And so I want to thank Samuel. I did not have the opportunity to talk to his friends. He's going to reach out to them. We'll see what comes of that. If they do, I will update this video. Thank you guys for joining me, and we will catch you on the next one.